Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are in the country, and happy holidays to everyone. My name is Jennifer Baird. I'm with the Office of Special Education Programs, and I'm very excited to be here today with you virtually to talk about the state strategies for seamless services, service delivery and transition, and looking at the extended Part C option. As I said who I am, we also have Kathy Heck, who will be introducing our other speakers today. Kathy is with the Office of Special Education Programs. You can go ahead and forward. The extended Part C option is available again to us this next fiscal year in 2019. As a reminder, the slide describes when the budget exceeds for Part C services exceeds $460 million, we have a reserve set aside for states who elect to offer Part C services beyond the age of 3. And we have, Kathy Heck will share with you some of the stipulations of that. Before I get to that, I want to let you know that our speakers today are going to be talking about how their states has used the extended Part C option. If you have specific questions about your state and how you might take part in this option, I ask you to contact your state lead, who will set up a call to discuss the very specific things that your state needs to do. But with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Heck. Kathy, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Kathy Heck, and I am the Early Childhood Transition Lead for OSEP. And over the past several months, as a special education community, we've been encouraged to rethink how we're doing our work, how we problem solve together, and how we have meaningful and effective collaboration in our service to children. So as you'll hear in today's presentation, as well as the one that's scheduled to take place in January, this work is already happening as states decide to use more innovative approaches to serve children and families in the area of early childhood transition. So we hope that while you're learning what is being done in other states today, that you'll be inspired to think bigger and think outside the box as you rethink how to address challenges and make changes to provide children and families with a seamless system of services. So looking at this first slide, as we know, both IDEA statute and regulations provide guidance for states to use as they develop and implement their transition policies and procedures. The Part C extended option is also addressed in that guidance. In particular, on this slide, I want to highlight that statute actually says that flexibility is allowed for states to set up their systems and that identification of funding sources has to be included within that state's policy. Next slide. And then in the regulations, in sections 303, 211, and 303, 344, they apply to the Part C extended option. And they state that children and families who are eligible to receive services under 619 can continue to receive Part C services beyond the age of 3. But those children must have an IFSP in place that includes an educational component. So how are states using Part C extended option to offer a better transition experience to their children and families? What are the considerations that you'll need to keep in mind? What are the implications for data? And what are the changes you may need to make in your state to build a more seamless system? Today, our Maryland and DC colleagues are going to share their state system models with us. And I think you'll find the information presented valuable as you consider some of the options that are available to use in your state. So I'll now turn the presentation over to Marcella and Pam from Maryland, who are going to give us a snapshot of the Maryland model for providing seamless birth to 5 services. And they will be followed by Alan and Carlene from DC, who will tell us a little bit about DC's model.
Thank you, Kathy. Good afternoon. This is Marcella Frankowski, the Assistant State Superintendent in Maryland, and thank you for this opportunity to share Maryland's work around our implementation of the extended Part C option that we call Family Choice option here in Maryland. We're in our 9th year, and Maryland, as you can see from this map, is divided into 24 local school systems. In addition, we serve and accountable for Maryland School for the Deaf and Maryland School for the Blind. Next slide, please. Please know that the extended option for us truly served as a catalyst to be a vehicle to create a seamless system in Maryland and to support our strategic plan. So as you can see here, early childhood is one of our strategic imperatives that is in our strategic plan, and our focus is on to narrow the gap for our students with developmental delays and disabilities. So as we look at this work and as we're implementing a seamless system, I can share with you that the extended IFSP option, or our family choice option, created a mirror image and really mirrored that transition between infants and toddlers and preschool special education for our children and families. And our service model in preschool special education, after this implementation of several years, is starting to mirror our infants and toddler service model. So our families are truly getting one service model that offers a range and a depth of services, as well as locations of delivery of service. So if I had to share one major piece with you for us to have our children with disabilities and developmental delays ready for kindergarten, it would truly be this the blending of our service delivery models between our infants and toddlers program and preschool special education because of this family choice. Just very quickly, next slide, please. This shares with you the numbers of children that we serve here in Maryland, knowing that the orange circle reflects our one moment in time, our snapshot data for students birth to 3. Pretty consistently, we have served over 1,000 students on our family choice option, the square box at the bottom, so it's about 1,306 this year. And then our preschool special education is about over 13,000. Please note that if we do not look at snapshot, we support about 18,300 children and families birth through age 4. So if we would combine those orange and green circles, we're over 18,000. So that just tells you about the number of children served. Next slide, please. So we are a little unique in our background information to let you know how some of the variables that really supported us in moving this family choice further along at a rate was, number one, Maryland is unique in that it's one of 5 birth mandate states. We also, at the State Department here of Education, we are the lead agency for our Maryland Infants and Toddlers program, while our individual local school systems have a choice to identify their lead agency. The Department of Education is the state lead agency. And we also have a very broad eligibility criteria. So we have 25% delay in one or more area of development, as well as any atypical development noted, as well as a high probability condition. So we do have a very wide net to support our youngest children and families. Next slide, please. So to give you a little bit of focus for our family choice in the extended Part C option in Maryland, we began in February the 1st, actually, of 2010 to identify those children who were eligible for preschool special education services that were already in our infants and toddlers program. And this is, our work here for implementation began in 2010. So it almost took us, and I want to give you a true, honest feeling about the implementation. I would say that it was over a year to plan the initial rollout. So while we began this work in 2010, it was over a year to begin the initial rollout. Also, stakeholder input was critical, a critical piece of our work every step of the way, prior to implementation, during implementation, and it continues to be a piece of how we refine, enhance this system of services in Maryland. For the first several years, we solicited a lot of stakeholder input with regard to the best ending age. So we got buy-in quickly for families to have the choice, and our biggest message was that parents, families of atypically developing children would have the same choice as parents who have typically developing children. So we had a lot of strong stakeholder input for this, but the biggest challenge or the decision we had to make was the best ending age for the extended option. How far would Maryland go in that age? The Code of Maryland regulations for Part C, including the extended IFSP option, then went into effect, as you can see, April the 2nd, 2013. Now in Maryland, and after stakeholder input and multiple opportunities for conversation, we extend our IFSP, our infants and toddler services, to the beginning of the school year following the child's 4th birthday. Another major exciting piece about this, or decision making for Maryland for us, was the child, when you look at a birth to 3 service delivery model, and that 3-year-old birthday is October, November, it really sets a family, whether they're in the option or not, it puts them in a very challenging place to find services or support, or even any access to a community preschool program once we've already started the year. So this allowed us to get into the natural progression of a child's age and the natural progression of services and schooling. Next slide, please. We thought you may appreciate this chart. This gives us, with regard to the number of children in the extended IFSP option here in Maryland, it's remained fairly consistent at about 11 to 13% of all children in Part C. It's picked up a little momentum, but we continue to stay consistent and strong in this service delivery model. Next slide, please. So as you compare this work, here's Maryland's most current data with regard to the percentage of families who have chosen and who choose an extended IFSP, or the family choice. And as you can see, I wanted to share with you some of the discussions that our families, and a variety of reasons of why they make the choice. Please know, for those of you who are unaware of this, the option is not decided by an IFSP team. It is decided by the family, and that's why we have called it family choice, because it's not a IFSP team decision per se. It is truly the family's choice. So let me tell you a little bit about why families in Maryland have chosen to stay on the extended IFSP or move to an IEP. Number one, they've said that they're already receiving functional routines-based intervention at home and or in community settings, and prefer these services to continue. They want a continued service coordination component, continuous year-round services, and family-centered, or family education, we call it, services and supports. So that was really the core strength of Maryland's infants and toddlers model. As I shared with you at the beginning, our preschool special education component is really starting to mirror some of these exact services that are in IFSP world, but this was the comfort level of our families really drove some of their decision making. And then another would be that they have shared is that they want to have their child with other siblings, either at home, in a child care setting, or in a school setting. So it was really driven by family need. We also heard that they would choose to go into preschool special education versus staying in the extended IFSP option because the mother or the caretaker needed to go back to work. And that was another, a more full service, or they felt full day opportunity. So those are the families' feedback for us of why they made that choice at age 3. Next slide, please. Some lessons learned. I'd like some higher level lessons learned, and then Pam, I'm going to turn it over to Pam, who will give you a few more additional considerations. But the big picture and lessons learned from Maryland was, number one, despite the variability, because we do have pretty autonomy, decisions at each local school system and each local program, but despite the variability between our programs, the ratio of families that choose the extended option versus an IEP remains relatively consistent, and that's about 66%. Next, another lessons learned was that families report that service coordination and continuous year-round services are the major reasons for choosing the extended IFSP. Next, providers have reported some difficulty staying neutral regarding family decision-making, IEP versus IFSP. We have issued a technical assistance bulletin, which all of you, of course, have access to any of our materials here in Maryland, on effective transition practices, and this has really supported some of the decision-making by our families in this critical decision. Also necessary and very, very important, probably one of the most important bullets here in the lessons learned, was the necessity to provide continued messaging about school readiness and children on an extended IFSP receiving services in community settings. So two pieces here, that the role of the infants and toddlers program when you're on an extended IFSP is clearly, we know that readiness begins at birth, but that clearly our infants and toddler service providers and the service coordination that occurred was really focusing on school readiness in reading and literacy and math, which was a learning curve in our infants and toddlers model. And then secondly, talking about IFSP services being delivered while in natural environments. A natural environment for a 3- and 4-year-old is more typically aligned to community settings and not always or solely delivered in the home setting. So those messages about school readiness and where IFSP services were delivered were critical in our shift. When we first started, our 3s and 4s were all being served in the home. So there didn't appear to be any difference in the service delivery model between infants and toddlers and preschool special education and that movement. While we're mirroring options and a continuum of services in Maryland, that's a critical piece. And then last, and you all know this, broad stakeholder input is critical. And, you know, again, I started with that and I continue to say, not only guiding some of your decision making as you're creating this, because it is a systems change. It will change the way you deliver services and your work birth to 5. Absolutely no question. It's a systems change. But not only prior to, but during, and then continuing now to follow that implementation. So thank you for having Marilyn with you today, and Pam Miller is going to give you a few more considerations. Happy holidays, everyone.
Next slide, please. So now we're going to share a few specific considerations when you think about the extended Part C option around finance, around service provision, personnel development, family impact, and data systems and monitoring. And this slide shows you a couple finance considerations. The extended option in Maryland is funded by both federal and state funds through a birth through 4 funding formula, and it's also funded by local funds. With regard to other finance considerations, we are a birth mandate state, so we don't have any family fees, and our medical assistance billing does cover children on the extended IFSP option, no difference from our children birth to age 3. Next slide. As we really think about service provision and personnel development, and Marcella certainly alluded to this, it is critical to have strong collaborative partnerships between Part C and Part B 619 staff at both the state and the local level. So having both Part C and preschool special education in the same state agency and in the same division has been very helpful for us. And most of our programs, education, the education local school system is the local lead agency. Additionally, we already had our birth to 8 standards in place, including Maryland Healthy Beginnings, which are developmental guidelines, birth through age 3. So this was very helpful as we rolled out guidance and training around the educational component, which is required. Another consideration, which Marcella already discussed, is the service delivery model. In Maryland, we continue to send a very strong message around children in the extended IFSP having access to and receiving services with typically developing peers. Next slide. With regard to family impact considerations, it's critical to have very clear information for families to be fully informed about their choice at age 3 And it's critical that providers have clear information about effective transition practices so they can provide unbiased information to families. To help facilitate transition planning, the Division of Early Intervention and Special Education Services created several resources. These include, you can see here, a family guide to next steps. When your child in early intervention turns 3, families have a choice. And then a technical assistance bulletin, effective transitioning practices supporting family choice at age 3. Next slide, please. This is an example. This comes out of our next steps bulletin, and it is a flow chart that shows the transition steps and includes the transition planning meeting between 9 months and no later than 90 days prior to the child's 3rd birthday, and then the determination of eligibility for preschool special education. When the child is already receiving Part C and is found eligible, then the family has the choice to continue through an extended IFSP or to begin preschool special ed and related services through an IEP. We've also created transition flow charts to clearly depict transition activities at age 3, after age 3, and transition activities prior to a child transitioning at the beginning of the school year following the 4th birthday. And those transition flow charts were really invaluable for people to understand those different points of transition. All right, finally, it is important to consider your data system because you know, you certainly need to always be monitoring for continuous improvement, and you need to make adjustments to data and monitoring. Your data system really does need to capture all the necessary elements for Part C, birth to 3, for the extended Part C option, and for Part B, 619 preschool special education, including our SPP APR indicators. Additionally, we have made some revisions to our IFSP to accommodate the educational component on the child and family outcomes page, where they literally check off that they have done those 3 areas: pre-literacy, numeracy, and language. And we also created a transition after age 3 page of our IFSP. We have included indicators about the extended IFSP option within our birth to 21 monitoring tool. So we did have to do some, some additional considerations. Oh, and we also, thank you. We did add questions on our family survey that actually addressed that family choice. Did families feel supported and with regard to making that choice, and then were they able to really implement those outcomes around language, pre-literacy, and numeracy to help their child develop and learn. All right, so our last slide just is a summary slide that really looks at the points of transition, birth to kindergarten, in a system of services. There are certainly many things to think about with the extended option, but in Maryland, we truly believe it has pushed us to create a birth to kindergarten system of services. The implementation of the IFSP option served as that catalyst to promote coordinated, comprehensive services, allowing for a much more seamless transition based on family choice. So as we look at the many points of birth to K transition, we believe these points of transition are now more family friendly with the extended IFSP option in place for families to make the best choice for their child and family. So thank you so much for having us share our experiences, and I'd like to turn it over now to Washington, D.C.
Hello, my name is Alan Phillips. I'm the Part C coordinator for the District of Columbia, and Carlene is going to do some of the slides too. We'll give you some background, and Carlene will talk about some of the considerations we have if you're choosing extended option. Next slide. Just a little bit of background on the District of Columbia. We're a little bit smaller than Maryland. We're kind of tiny, but we're bigger than a couple states, and our population is 693,000. We have about 9,000 children are born in the district every year, and approximately 26,000 children birth through age 3 are in the district. Next slide. We do have some unique characteristics. We have the District of Columbia actually leads the nation in universal preschool, pre-K, for 3 and 4-year-olds. And that is a big consideration as you're working, because we have a lot of 3 and 4-year-olds are in child care centers, and we deliver a lot of Part C services in child care centers also. 72% of all the 3-year-olds and 86% of all the 4-year-olds were enrolled in pre-K. That's voluntary on the part of the parents, but it's a pretty high percentage of the children. And we've been making some changes effective just past July 1st. We changed our eligibility from what it was before, 50% delay in one area or 25% delay in 2 areas, to the 25% delay in 1 area, just like Maryland has. So we have a broad eligibility criteria for our children also. Next slide. And the extended option, we started it July 1st, 2014. So we've been doing it 4 years or 5 years. And that's just what we, put in our regulations about it, that it started then. And we're the same as Maryland. Our option extends up to the first day of school following the child's 4th birthday. Slide. This is some of the data that we have. Again, we're not as large as Maryland, but in looking at it, we're trying to get a sense, because it's a family choice. So we don't know how many are leaving and going to be, or how many are staying until it really happens. So in terms of planning, we're trying to track it better. And as you can see, we started in 2014 for half the year, 65, 137, 109. We're growing in general in our Part C program, and we're trying to just track the percentages. And I think these look pretty similar to what Maryland has too. 12 to 14% of the kids stay in the extended, that make up your total caseload of children that you are taking care of. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carlene, and she can introduce herself, and she's going to share some of the considerations and learnings that we've had as we've been doing the extended option.
Thank you, Alan. My name is Carlene Reed. I am the 619 coordinator for Washington, D.C. We had 4 buckets of considerations. I will say most of the content probably mirrors what Marilyn said in regards to when it comes to finances, personnel development, early childhood infrastructure, and the data systems and monitoring components. So next slide. So as you know, there's a financial impact. DC's Medicaid plan will cover early intervention services for children eligible for Part C up to they enter school. So there is some help when children stay on extended option there. It is primarily though locally funded, and we don't charge any families any fees. When it comes to personnel development, similar to what Marilyn said, there needs to be a strong working relationship between Part C and Part B. And again, locally and within the state, we have several meetings related to our transition processes. Our local meetings typically focus on certain cases, and then our state meetings typically focus on the policy and programmatic provisions that need to be arranged to kind of assist with the transition. And also, it has to be well communicated to families. So part of the personnel development is making sure that our providers, whether it be related service providers, our service coordinators, our early childhood workforce, knows about the option. And then communicates it consistently to our families. And in this communication, we're thinking about, what is the difference between service delivery in Part B versus Part C, making sure parents are educated on their rights, what does it mean to access FAPE, and then the transition process in general. And we also see that, similar to Maryland, many of the reasons why our families are taking the extended option is because we have okay, I'm sorry, the message popped up. We have our community-based settings, our options for children to receive services in, as well as our LEAs, and we have locally funded preschool. So a lot of our families are making some significant choices in regards to what works for their lifestyle, the quality of their care, and where they would like their children to receive care. Next slide. And then the early childhood infrastructure in general, the DC municipal regulations include extended options. So it's something that our DC City Council invests in. They check frequently on us to see how we're doing with offering the option. And then our Strong Start DC's early intervention program does a lot of outreach and training to, again, remind the workforce that this is an option that can be provided to families, but then also just about, the screening process. Some of the things that we see are when, children you can't have extended option unless you are eligible for Part C. So we're really pushing for our providers, our early childhood providers, to do screenings and try to catch children early because of our current infrastructure. They would have to receive Part B services in a school setting. So we really push, when to make sure that families have all the choices that, people are finding children eligible earlier so that they have all the options there throughout the child's preschool career. Is that it? And then the last component is the data, will be data systems and monitoring. Just making sure that, again, with the early childhood or with the extended option, we have a really quick window when a child or a family decides to go with FAPE. So making sure that the LEA is communicated with, we're looking at possibly just different systems or how we can improve our system so that all LEAs are aware of when a child is accessing FAPE in a timely manner and that they have all the information that they need to go ahead and get the IEP in place. And then sometimes we just need more information. So making sure that the system is able to disaggregate data so that sometimes we just need to know, pulling out numbers about extended option or how many kids are accessing it versus just who are 0 to 3 in Part C. I think we first kind of took it on, we realized that, we can't tease it out. So making sure that that enhancement is there in your data system. And that's pretty much it for our areas of consideration. That is Alan and I's contact information.
Everybody, we really have a time here. If you have questions, this is Kathy Whaley at the ECTA Center, and we do have time for you to ask the folks from Maryland and OSEP and DC questions. As Jennifer said in the very beginning, if it's a highly state-specific application question, it's probably a great idea if you contact your OSEP state contact. But we know there might be other questions of just how this is played out and the things that Maryland and DC have had to do, or you might have some questions about the funding that's available. So there's a couple ways you can unmute. If you missed the slide at the beginning, you can go to the navigation toolbar that is at the top or the bottom of your screen. Just take your cursor up there around the top or the very bottom of your screen and wave it around and you'll see a toolbar. To the left is a mic that says mute, unmute. You can unmute there. Or if you have the participants list open, you can take your cursor and hover to the right of your name, and you have an opportunity to unmute yourself as well. And I'm also going to be watching the chat along with the panelists. So what kinds of questions do you have about the implementation of the extended Part C option in the district or Maryland?
Kathy, this is Jennifer.
Yeah.
Jennifer Baird, because as the questions are forming, I want to thank both DC and Maryland for sharing their experience with the extended Part C option. It was very nice to hear the work that they've been doing to give families choice. As Kathy Hack pointed out, We want states to have the flexibility, and this option does allow flexibility for states, but also the options for families to ensure that smooth transition. It is really important, as they pointed out, with the stakeholder involvement, but also the collaboration between both Part B and Part C, which is necessary to have this go forth. And again, I just want to thank everyone for participating in this webinar, and for ECTA for highlighting it once again. This was featured at the Improving Outcomes Conference, and we appreciate having it been recorded for posterity as states are thinking about this as they approach this next grant period.
Thank you, Jennifer. We do have a question from Anna Hollister in the chat, and she is asking, are there any fiscal concerns with implementation given your current fiscal state budgets? And so if our panelists will unmute themselves and respond.
This is Alan from the District of Columbia. There are fiscal concerns because if they're staying in Part C, you really have to figure out, are you going to get money in Part C? Or if they're going to B, how many kids are going where? So I think it really depends on how your state is set up with it. In the district, they just look at it that we're going to serve all these kids, whether they're in B or C. And since we're one big locality, city, state, they are willing to fund it if it's with us or if they go to B. So it has not been a real big fiscal concern for us because it's been locally funded all the time, except for this past year when they opened it up and we got some more support from OSEP.
And this is Pam in Maryland, and fortunately, we have not had huge fiscal concerns. You know, we were fortunate enough to initially have some of the ARA funding to set up our systems, and then we have been able to, through federal and we do get some state funds just for our Part C program. And also then the local funds also support the program. So we at this point, there's always concerns with regard to the fiscal, and as referral numbers increase and those types of things, you know, there are always a lot of concerns from the local programs, but we really at this point are trying to stay on top of those and support, you know, that at least as much as we can at the state level.
Thanks, Pam. And there's another question from Jill Singer. Does the funding available allow for planning time? Jill, do you mean the planning time by the providers, or I guess let's see if our state colleagues need any clarification.
Well, that might be more of a question with regard to maybe for OSEP of would they be given a year to do planning and be able to have money support that? Is that what's being asked?
This is Kathy Heck. That might be what's being asked, and I actually do not know the answer to that. Jennifer?
If I understand, we're going to all try to guess what the question is. When you are taking the Part C option, the extended Part C option, the resources that come from this are not, it doesn't include, you're agreeing to provide the option. So it's not like you can, if I understand the question, it's like take the money, plan, and then participate the next year. So it's immediate.
Thank you. And we have a question from Barb Cohen. Did the budget for providing services increase, decrease, or stay constant after extending Part C?
Well, this is Alan again from DC. For us, it definitely increased our budget. And again, we're small proportionally, but if we have 100 more kids that we're serving, there's the cost of services for them. but we also have changed on our eligibility. So it's a little, we're growing in two ways, but the costs went up each year. Yes.
Okay.
And I would chime in, this is Carlene, because it's in our DC municipal regulations, there is a bit of a commitment from our legislators there to support it. So that is helpful since it's something that was initiated. Even with the change in our 25% delay, that was something that was initiated by a council member and endorsed. So because they're initiating these things, they're making sure that it becomes considered in budget.
And this is Pam from Maryland, and I would say that I don't have exact numbers. It's certainly with regard to there was an increase with children being served on an IFSP. So for Part C, there was an increase, but then we did have some decrease with regard to children receiving service preschool. But, you are keeping those two systems really going. So I kind of am morphing into that next question. So because in Maryland, many programs were already doing more birth to kindergarten, they were really able to use resources across infants and toddlers and preschool special education. So, workforce wise, we actually did pretty well. I think it's been more difficult for those programs where education has not been the lead agency and where there isn't as much of that crossing, one service provider providing both services in infants and toddlers as well as preschool. That's been a little bit more challenging when it's all separate. And then there was a question about negative impact on the Part B workforce. So there certainly was a reduction in children, but then with the overall growth of children, just sort of like what you were saying Alan was saying in DC, we've just seen overall growth in every year in our Part C and our preschool special education. So I don't really feel like there was any negative impact on the Part B workforce.
And let me repeat the question because that was sent to the panelists and not to all of the attendees.
Sorry.
Lisa was asking, what kind of considerations were given to the Part C workforce as additional children were involved for them, and then whether there was a negative impact to Part B because there was a reduction in children for 1 year. And so that's what Pam is responding to. And we did have, before you respond, Alan and Carlene, it appears you did answer Jill Singer's question. She said exactly.
Kathy Whaley, this is Jennifer Barrett-Zikas. I noticed a live question. I don't know if you saw it as well. Someone had asked, is this completely a Part C decision? I did try to answer. I answered it remotely, but I don't know if everyone saw that question. So it is a decision that both Part C and Part B have to agree to.
Yeah.
And so when we do, yes. And when we're meeting with, if there are states that are interested, we will need to meet with both, have that informational call with both Part C and Part B. And that's a very important distinction to know that.
Thank you. Thank you for lifting that up. We also have a question from Patricia, but Patricia is using an acronym that I'm not sure I know what it means. Patricia, can you clarify what TSVI is? She says she's from California and she wants to know how related service staff are being implemented or accounted for as a TSVI. We cover birth to 22. Do you have a TSVI on staff or collaborate with LEAs to provide related services? I'm wondering if this is vision impairment. As you know, there's a national shortage and we are being spread thin. And we're going to have to move quickly, folks, because we're getting more calls and we're getting closer on time. Teacher of students with visual impairments. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you. Okay, so I was close.
So in Maryland, so the teachers visually impaired, that is all through the local system. And yes, so for most programs, there would be, that person would most likely be working birth through 21 in Maryland. And so it really, while there is a shortage of those teachers, the extended option, there's no impact with regard to the option.
Alan and Carlene, what about DC?
I would basically mirror exactly that. Some of our individuals who have certain levels of expertise are kind of spread across or contracted both Part C and for in Part B, either by an LEA or the Strong Start system. So I would agree. I don't know if there will be a specific impact other than it's a shortage in and of itself that probably impacts both sides.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you see any impact on your Part B, Section 619 LEA staff as a result of doing this?
It was for DC. It was more or less not necessarily the change in numbers, but it was more or less training LEAs how to respond when a child or a family accesses FAPE. And we're still actually working through that process a little bit. Making sure that the LEAs know that it's now their responsibility to get the IEP in place. We have a bit of a tier going on. We have our DC public schools who do Part B 619 Child Find, but then we also have a large network of charter schools. So we're actually doing a working group right now. We're smoothing out some of those communication processes, and then also circling back to our data system. Sometimes during the summer months, you have to wait for a feed to go live before a charter can see a child who was found, who was going through Child Find and through DCPS. So smoothing that process out hopefully makes things a little easier, but I don't think necessarily personnel outside of training and then the technical component.
Thanks.
Kathy, this is Jennifer Baird again.
Do we have another question?
There was another question that came as a live question. It kind of goes back to another question, so I'm going to repeat it, but it may have already been answered. The question was, what if Part C wants to participate, but Part B does not? This goes back to a question we'd answered earlier, and it requires both B and C to come to an agreement to participate.
Thanks. And Christine, I got up to that Q&A. Christine wants to know, please address who funds this. Christine, are you talking about within Maryland and DC? Are you talking, I'm figuring you're talking state level, not federal. So why don't you folks just say kind of how is this funded? What are you using to, oh, she's saying federal. Okay, so Christine wants to know at the federal level who funds this. Well, it's the Office of Special Education Programs, U.S. Department of Education. The congressional allotment. Would y'all like to address that?
I'm sorry, if you could pull that, Kathy, can you go back to I think it's the second slide. It describes the funding.
Yeah. Y'all, everybody close your eyes.
It'll go fast.
Because it's way back there.
Right.
Don't look at the screen. We also, Jill Singer has a question to say, in DC, are Part C and 619 under the same office?
Yeah.
And you are.
Yeah, Alan, yeah, in District of Columbia, we're both in the Department of Education, the Office of the State Superintendent, which I think is a real plus because we sit near each other and it helps with the coordination and collaboration. And we're both the state folks.
Yeah, I think for us though, the only sometimes the thing that comes in is like the more of the local component because we have now our large charter network, we have DC Public Schools, and then our childcare. Kind of rethinking exactly how we can get everyone to the table related to child finance. I think we have it pretty much down pat related to, you know, the state and us sitting very close to one another and constantly in communication, but then rolling on all those other partners who technically are placements for 619 is something that we are still working to approve a little bit upon because we do see a need there.
Thanks. So Jennifer, there you go.
Thank you very much. So as I said on the second slide, this describes
You're cutting out, Jennifer.
I apologize.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? So
I can hear you now.
I feel like that commercial is always ingrained in my head. Can you hear me now? So with under IDEA, according to section 643E, in any fiscal year when the appropriations exceed $460 million, the Secretary shall reserve 15% of the appropriated amount to provide incentive grants to the states that elect to offer Part C beyond the age of 3. So this is something that has become available. It was available last year, and we recognize Maryland and DC were already providing the extended Part C option. And there was a very short turnaround. So while states were interested, they weren't given a lot of time or any time to really prepare. So we wanted to make sure this year, when we found that it was available again, that we gave plenty of opportunity for states to start to think, plan, collaborate with Part C and Part B to decide if this was the right option for them. So I hope that helps.
And Vera Street Rentier says, do we have any states who are doing the option who are in different lead agencies for C and B? And I don't think we do.
At this time, the only 2 states that are providing the extended Part C option are DC and Maryland. Now, and I think I might be teeing up what you were going to close us with, Kathy, is that there is going to be a session in January talking about other flexibility within transition. Do you want to kind of carry us to that?
Yes. On January 14th, we are hosting Pam Thomas, the Part C coordinator from Missouri, and Sandy Dragenmeister, who is a professional development provider and lead for the transition efforts in New Mexico. And both of them are going to talk about strategies that they are using to support more seamless transitions for children. In the case of Missouri, they consider what they're doing as a type of option. They have developed policies, though it's not like what we've heard today. They have developed policies and procedures and guidance so that children may remain in Part C through the summer of their 3rd birthday before moving forward. And they're going to share what they're doing there and the impact that it's had and how they're doing it. And then New Mexico has a rather long history of creating an infrastructure to support effective and appropriate transitions from Part C to Part B, with a really an infrastructure that consists of transition coaches, interagency transition teams, a library of interagency agreements, quite a bit of work that's been done. They were, for those of you who are older, there used to be a lot of projects funded out of the Office of Special Education programs that really looked at strategies for transition. And they were one of the original project steps. So we have this event listed on our website. We have not put the link to add it to your Outlook calendar. We will be doing so, and it'll be the same process that you go to we will put it out on the listservs. You will go to the event page and accept it to be on your calendar. And then on the day of the event, the day of the call, you come in and register. Do we have any other questions for our presenters? There's one hand raised. Trying to figure out who
Kathy, I think there's a question from Talitha about, do settings for children served in 619 differ from settings for extended Part C?
Oh, thank you, Jill. Was that you?
It's Pam.
Oh, hey, Pam.
That's
Jill's
okay.
got her hand up. Jill, I'll come back to you. So what does it look like, folks, for Talitha's question? Thank you for bringing me back to that.
Sure. This is Pam, and this is a really interesting question. So in some local programs, there is no difference. They really, the full continuum is available for preschool and for extended Part C. And that was really, I think, really our vision when we started the option. I think in other local programs, it's just taken much longer with regard to sort of there being those options in both places. So, in some programs, there's more 619, it's more preschool, classroom setting, and for extended Part C, it's more home community settings, certainly childcare and those types of settings. But in some programs, it just doesn't matter if you're on an IFSP or an IEP, you can be served in any of those settings.
Thank you, Pam. We
Sure.
have just a minute to go. Alan, what would you and Carlene say about this?
I think currently the structure is, you're saying extended, how do they look the same or different? Our current structure is when a child qualifies for B, if they want to take the extended option, they can continue to receive their services at their current placement. But right now, how DC is structured, if a child qualifies and the parent wants to access Part B services, they have to go to an LEA. And we do have though an MOA where currently we're making strides towards it, the variety of actual placements that a child can be in. So right now, if a child is in Head Start and they qualify for B, then 619 will go and provide services at a Head Start. I think a goal is to eventually expand that to encompass other settings, especially with having the universal pre-K, funded by the district, making those settings a possible 619 site. But right now, or settings right now, extended pretty much is without having kids have to switch over. They would have to they can do extended stay at their child care centers, or if a parent wants to stay at a child care center, they have to take the extended option. Current setup, but I think we're a bit visionaries in our state education agency, so we'll stay tuned.
Yeah, it takes a while to blend. It takes a while to blend, but it'll happen.
Thank you all. I do want to lift up that Jill has asked something that we don't have time to really get into because the time for the call to end has occurred, but I at least want to honor the fact and say it out loud that she's pondering the notion of, in states where you do have different lead agencies, what kind of challenges would those states face in trying to do this? And I think, Jill, that would be a lovely question at the first of the year for you to post to the Part C listserv, and I could post it to the Section 619 listserv and see what people are thinking about with this. We really want to thank our colleagues from OSEP and from DC and from Maryland, and it's really been an honor for me to help support them in this call, and we look forward to you joining us in January for the next call. Any final words, panelists?
Well, this is Happy Holidays. This is Jennifer Barrett-Zakis, and on behalf of my colleague Kathy Heck and the Department of of Education, Office of Special Education, we thank you all for your time. Please do reach out to your state leads if you have more specific questions and would like us to set up a call to discuss what this could look like at your state. And again, have a wonderful day and a happy holiday.
Yes, have a happy holiday. Thank you for participating.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks for the kind words, Vera. And with that, we're going to end the call.